For years, you've probably heard that to stay strong as you age, you need to lift weights, get your heart rate up, break a sweat. And if you can't do that, if you're dealing with joint pain or balance issues, or you just never really exercised before, well, maybe you're just out of luck. But here's what the research actually shows. A 2019 meta analysis published in JAMA Internal Medicine, one of the most respected medical journals in the world, followed older adults who practiced Tai Chi regularly. The result? A 49% reduction in falls, nearly half. That's not a small effect. That's an effect size that outperforms many medications prescribed for the exact same purpose. And it gets better. The same body of research shows significant improvements in cognitive function, balance, confidence, and anxiety levels. Not bad for what most people write off as slow motion stretching in the park. Welcome to Longevity Lab. I'm Claire.
And I'm Robert. Claire, I have to say, I've walked past those Tai Chi groups in the park probably hundreds of times over the years, and I'll be honest, I never once thought of it as serious exercise. I sort of filed it under nice, gentle activity for keeping flexible, but nothing that would actually change your physiology. I had no idea the evidence was that strong.
You're in very good company with that assumption, Robert. And I think that's exactly why this is such an important conversation. Because the fitness industry has trained all of us to equate exercise with intensity. If you're not sweating, if you're not sore the next day, if your heart rate isn't pounding, it doesn't count. But the science of human movement tells a much more nuanced story, and Tai Chi, which has been practiced in China for centuries, is now backed by some of the most rigorous Western research we have on aging, balance, and cognitive health. The gap between what people assume about Tai Chi and what the evidence actually shows is genuinely enormous.
Okay, so let me start with what I think a lot of people my age believe, and you can tell me where I'm wrong. I'm in my mid-60s. I try to stay active. I walk. I do some light resistance work. But I've always thought of Tai Chi as something you do when you can't do real exercise anymore. It's the retirement home activity, the fallback option. Am I completely off base here?
You're describing exactly the perception that the research has completely overturned. And I want to be precise about why this matters. Let's start with the fall prevention data because that's where the evidence is strongest and most surprising. Falls are the leading cause of injury-related death in adults over 65. They're also a major cause of loss of independence. A bad fall can be the event that shifts someone from living at home to requiring assisted care. So preventing falls isn't a minor quality of life issue. It's literally life extending.
That's sobering. I know a few people in my circle who've had falls, and the recovery was long and difficult. One friend broke her hip 2 years ago, and she still walks with a cane and has lost a lot of confidence. It changes everything.
It absolutely does. And this is where the JAMA meta-analysis gets so compelling. The researchers pooled data from multiple high-quality randomized controlled trials. This is the gold standard of evidence. And they found that Tai Chi practice was associated with a 49% reduction in falls compared to controls. But here's the detail that really matters. They also found that Tai Chi reduced the rate of injurious falls by 50%. So it's not just preventing the minor stumbles, it's preventing the falls that send people to the hospital. The mechanism here is actually really interesting, and it's not what most people assume.
All right, you got my attention. What's actually happening in the body when someone practices Tai Chi? Because when I watch people doing it, it looks, forgive me, it looks like they're just moving their arms very slowly through the air. I don't see how that creates a 49% reduction in anything.
Haha, that's a very fair observation from the outside. But here's what biomechanics researchers have shown. Tai Chi movements are actually incredibly demanding on something called the neuromuscular system. That's the communication network between your brain, your nerves, and your muscles. When you're moving slowly through those postures, you're not primarily training muscle strength in the way that lifting a dumbbell does. You're training your body's proprioception. That's your sense of where your body is in space.
Proprioception. Can you unpack that a bit? I've heard the word, but I'm not sure I really understand what it means in practice.
Horse. Proprioception is sometimes called the sixth sense. It's how your brain knows where your limbs are without you looking at them. Close your eyes right now and touch your nose. You can do it because your proprioceptive system is working. That system relies on specialized sensory receptors in your muscles, tendons, and joints that are constantly sending information to your brain about position, movement, and force. As we age, proprioception naturally declines. And that decline is one of the major reasons older adults fall more often. Your brain gets less accurate information about where your feet are, so you're more likely to misjudge a step or not correct your balance in time.
So you're saying Tai Chi is essentially training that internal GPS system.
That's a great way to put it. Tai Chi is a continuous, low speed, high precision training program for your proprioceptive system. When you're moving slowly from one posture to another, shifting your weight from leg to leg, maintaining specific joint angles, you are giving your brain an enormous amount of proprioceptive feedback to process. Studies using motion capture technology have shown that experienced Tai Chi practitioners have significantly better joint position sense. That's a specific measure of proprioception compared to non practitioners of the same age. And here's the finding that surprised me most when I first came across it. The proprioceptive benefits of Tai Chi appear to transfer to everyday activities like walking on uneven surfaces, navigating stairs, and recovering from a trip, all the real world situations where falls actually happen.
So it's not just that you get better at the Tai Chi movements, you get better at not falling when you're walking to the mailbox. That's remarkable. But I'm still trying to picture the mechanism. If I'm doing one of those slow Tai Chi movements, let's say I'm shifting my weight from one foot to the other, what's actually happening in my body that's different from just standing on one foot?
This is where the physiology gets really elegant. Let me give you an analogy. Think of your balance system as a three-legged stool. One leg is your visual system, your eyes telling you where the horizon is and what's around you. The second leg is your vestibular system, the tiny balance organs in your inner ear that detect gravity and head movement. The third leg is your proprioceptive system, all those sensors in your muscles and joints we just talked about. As people age, they often become over-reliant on the visual leg. They need to see the ground, they need to look at their feet, they need visual reference points, but that's a fragile strategy. In low light, or when you're distracted, or when you have to turn your head to look at something, suddenly your main balance input is compromised and you're at risk.
That makes so much sense. I've noticed that myself. When I get up at night in a dark room, I'm much more unsteady than during the day. I instinctively reach for walls or furniture.
Exactly, and here's what Tai Chi does that's so powerful. The practice deliberately reduces reliance on vision and forces your brain to strengthen the other two legs of the stool, especially proprioception. Many Tai Chi movements are practiced with the head turning independently of the body, or with the gaze soft and unfocused, or with weight shifts that happen below your conscious awareness. You're teaching your brain to integrate balance information from your joints and your inner ear rather than just your eyes. Researchers call this sensory reweighting. Your brain literally changes the priority it gives to different balance inputs. And the beautiful thing is, once that neural pathway is strengthened, it works all the time, not just when you're doing Tai Chi.
Okay, I'm starting to see why it's not just gentle stretching. This is actually rewiring the brain's balance systems. But you also mentioned cognitive function and anxiety. Where does that come in? Because those seem like very different benefits from fall prevention.
They seem different, but they're actually connected through some fascinating shared mechanisms. Let's take cognitive function first. Multiple randomized controlled trials have shown that regular Tai Chi practice improves executive function. That's your brain's ability to plan, focus attention, remember instructions, and juggle multiple tasks. A 2022 systematic review published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society found that Tai Chi produced significant improvements in global cognitive function and memory in older adults, including those with mild cognitive impairment.
So we're talking about actual measurable changes in how the brain works, not just feeling more relaxed.
Correct. And the proposed mechanism here is what neuroscientists call dual task training. Most physical exercise is what researchers call a single task activity. You're running, your arms and legs are moving in repetitive patterns, your brain can pretty much go on autopilot. Tai Chi is fundamentally different. Every movement sequence requires your brain to simultaneously manage multiple demands. You're coordinating arm movements, leg positions, weight shifts, breathing patterns, and often a specific mental focus, all at the same time, continuously, with precision.
So it's like patting your head and rubbing your belly, but much more complex and sustained for 20 or 30 minutes.
That's actually not a bad comparison. And here's why dual task training matters for cognitive function. As we age, the brain's ability to process multiple streams of information simultaneously tends to decline. You might find it harder to listen to a conversation while walking through a crowded room, or to remember a phone number while looking for a pen. That's your dual task processing capacity decreasing. Tai Chi directly challenges and builds that capacity. Functional MRI studies have shown that Tai Chi practitioners have increased connectivity in the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus brain regions critical for executive function and memory. The practice is essentially a workout for your brain's multitasking circuitry.
That's genuinely fascinating. And I have to admit, I'm starting to feel a bit foolish for dismissing it all those years. What about anxiety? Where does the mental health piece fit in?
The anxiety research is equally compelling, and it operates through a combination of physiological and psychological pathways. A 2020 meta analysis in the Journal of Clinical Medicine examined 37 randomized controlled trials and found that Tai Chi significantly reduced anxiety symptoms across diverse populations, not just older adults, but also younger people with chronic conditions, and people with diagnosed anxiety disorders. The effect size was comparable to some forms of psychotherapy and medication.
That's a strong claim. Comparable to therapy and medication? How does slow movement produce that kind of effect?
There appear to be multiple mechanisms working together. First, there's the breathing component. Tai Chi emphasizes slow, deep diaphragmatic breathing coordinated with movement. This type of breathing directly activates the parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest mode, and dampens the sympathetic fight or flight response that drives anxiety. You're essentially giving your nervous system a sustained signal of safety. Second, there's the mindfulness element. Tai Chi requires present moment attention to body sensations and movement quality. You can't be worrying about tomorrow's meeting or ruminating about something you said yesterday while you're trying to execute a precise sequence of postures. It's a form of moving meditation.
So it's hitting the anxiety from multiple angles, the body's stress response, the mind's attention patterns, and probably also the social aspect if you're practicing in a group.
You've anticipated my third point. Social connection is indeed one of the mechanisms. Many studies of Tai Chi involve group practice, and we know that social isolation is a major risk factor for both anxiety and cognitive decline. But even when researchers control for the social component, comparing group Tai Chi to other group activities, Tai Chi still shows superior effects on anxiety. So there's something specific about the practice itself beyond just being with people.
All right, Claire, I am thoroughly convinced that I underestimated Tai Chi, but now I need the practical part. If someone like me, a complete beginner, no martial arts background, reasonable but not exceptional fitness for my age wants to try this, what does the research say about how to actually do it? How often? For how long? What kind of Tai Chi? Because I'm guessing there are different styles and I have no idea where to start.
These are exactly the right questions, and I love that you're asking about what the evidence shows rather than just general recommendations. Let me give you the specific research grounded guidance. First, on style. Most of the high quality clinical trials showing benefits for balance, cognition, and anxiety have used Yang style Tai Chi. This is the most widely practiced style worldwide, characterized by slow flowing, large frame movements with relatively high stances, meaning you don't have to crouch down into deep knee bends. It's the style that's most accessible for beginners and the one with the strongest evidence base for the health outcomes we've been discussing.
Yang style. Got it. What about frequency and duration? Do I need to do this every day?
The research suggests that frequency matters more than session length for most outcomes. The studies that have shown significant fall reduction typically involve Tai Chi practice 2 to 3 times per week, with sessions lasting about 45 to 60 minutes each. That seems to be the minimum effective dose. Some studies with even stronger results involve daily practice, but the sweet spot for beginners appears to be 3 sessions per week. The key thing is consistency over time. The JAMA study I mentioned earlier, the participants had been practicing for a minimum of 6 months, and the benefits on balance were progressive, meaning they continued to improve the longer people practiced.
So this isn't a quick fix. You're committing to a practice.
Exactly. And I think that's important to say up front because we live in a culture that's always looking for the shortcut. The one weird trick, the 10-minute miracle workout Tai Chi, is a skill that develops over time. The good news is that even in the short term, studies show benefits. One randomized trial found that just 8 weeks of twice weekly Tai Chi produced measurable improvements in balance and reduced fear of falling. But the really impressive effect sizes, the 49% fall reduction, come with sustained practice over months and years.
That's actually encouraging to me. It means I don't have to be perfect right away. I can start, be clumsy, slowly get better, and the benefits accumulate.
That's the exactly right mindset, and I want to highlight something you just said. Fear of falling, that's actually a clinically significant outcome that researchers measure. Fear of falling leads to a vicious cycle. Someone has a near fall or a minor fall. They become afraid, so they restrict their activity, which leads to muscle weakness and worse balance, which makes them more likely to fall, which increases fear. Tai Chi breaks that cycle. Studies consistently show that Tai Chi practitioners develop greater balance confidence. They trust their bodies more, so they stay more active, which maintains their physical function.
That's such an important point. It's not just the physical benefit, it's the psychological liberation of not being afraid to move. I've seen that in friends. They start limiting what they do because they're worried about falling and their world just shrinks.
Robert, that's beautifully said, and it's exactly why I find this research so empowering. This is not about adding something else to worry about or some new thing you're failing at. It's about evidence showing that a very gentle, accessible practice can genuinely maintain your freedom of movement and your cognitive sharpness as you age.
Okay, so let me get really practical. If I wanted to start today, what would you suggest? I don't have a Tai Chi class down the street likely. Can I learn from videos? Does that work as well as in-person instruction?
This is a nuanced answer, but an important one. The research on delivery method is still emerging, but the studies that have compared in-person Tai Chi to video-based or online Tai Chi have found generally comparable benefits for balance and cognitive outcomes, with a slight edge to in-person instruction for technique refinement. Here's my practical recommendation. If you can find a qualified in person instructor, especially for your first 8 to 12 weeks, that's ideal. You'll get feedback on your posture and alignment that's hard to get from a screen. But if that's not accessible, and for many people it's not, A well structured online program with progressive lessons is absolutely valuable and evidence supported. What matters most is that you start and that you're consistent. Of course, if you have an existing condition, especially balance disorders, knee or hip issues, or a history of falls, that's definitely a conversation to have with your doctor before starting any new movement practice.
That makes sense. And I appreciate you mentioning the doctor conversation. I think a lot of people skip that step and then get into trouble. But assuming someone gets the green light, what does an actual session look like? Walk me through what I'd be doing for 45 minutes.
A typical evidence based Tai Chi session for health has three components, and I'll describe them in the order they typically appear. The first is a warm up, usually about 10 to 15 minutes. This involves gentle joint rotations, circling the wrists, ankles, shoulders, and hips, along with some light stretching and breathing exercises. The goal is to increase joint mobility and bring your attention into your body. The second and longest component is the form practice. This is where you learn and practice the specific sequences of movements. For a beginner, this might involve learning just 3 to 5 movements in a session, repeated multiple times. The instructor demonstrates, you follow, and over weeks you gradually build up a longer sequence. The third component is usually a cool down with breathing exercises and sometimes a brief standing or seated meditation. The whole thing is done at a deliberate, unhurried pace.
3 to 5 movements doesn't sound overwhelming. I was imagining having to memorize some impossibly long choreography.
That's a common misconception, too, that Tai Chi requires learning a huge, complex routine before you get any benefit. The research actually shows that simplified, shorter forms produce significant health benefits. You don't need to master the full traditional 108 move sequence. Many clinical trials have used protocols with just 8 to 12 core movements repeated over the session, so the barrier to entry is much lower than most people imagine.
That is genuinely reassuring. So I could learn a handful of movements, practice them regularly, and I'm still getting the science backed benefits.
Absolutely. And let me add one more piece of practical guidance from the research that I think is especially important for beginners. One of the key principles in Tai Chi is maintaining what's called a rooted stance, meaning your weight is sunk into your feet, your knees are slightly bent but not locked, and your posture is upright but relaxed. Studies using force plate technology, those are platforms that measure balance, have shown that this rooted stance is one of the main mechanisms through which Tai Chi improves balance. So even if you're just standing in the basic posture and shifting your weight from leg to leg, you're getting a meaningful training effect.
So I don't need to stress about getting every arm movement perfect. The foundation is in the stance and the weight shift.
That's exactly right. And here's where I want to bring in a case study that really brings all of this together. There's a landmark study called the Tai Chi for Parkinson's Disease Trial, published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2012. Parkinson's is a neurological condition that progressively impairs balance and movement. It's exactly the population you'd expect to be at extremely high risk for falls. The researchers randomized people with mild to moderate Parkinson's to either Tai Chi resistance training or stretching. After 6 months, the Tai Chi group was significantly better on measures of balance, gait, and functional reach than either of the other two groups, and they had fewer falls.
That's almost hard to believe. People with a neurological movement disorder and slow motion exercise outperformed traditional strength training for balance outcomes.
It's counterintuitive, but it makes sense when you understand the mechanisms we've been discussing. Parkinson's disease impairs the brain's ability to automate movement. People with Parkinson's often have to think consciously about movements that the rest of us do automatically: walking, turning, reaching. Tai Chi is essentially a practice of mindful, deliberate movement movement control, it trains exactly the neural pathways that Parkinson's degrades. The resistance training group got stronger, and strength is important, but strength alone doesn't prevent falls if your balance and movement coordination are compromised. This study beautifully illustrates that different types of exercise confer different benefits, and that the best exercise depends on what outcome you're targeting.
That's a profound point. We tend to think of exercise as one thing. You're either exercising or you're not. But what you just described is that different movement practices are almost like different medications for different body systems.
That's a perfect analogy, and it leads me to a broader point I want to make about the fitness industry. For decades, the public health messaging around exercise has been dominated by aerobic activity and strength training. Get your heart rate up, lift heavy things, repeat. Those are absolutely valuable, but the research on what I'll call neuromotor exercise, movement practices that specifically train balance, coordination, proprioception, and mind body integration, is now robust enough that it should be considered a third essential pillar alongside cardio and strength. Tai Chi is the most studied example, but dance, certain forms of yoga, and some martial arts likely confer similar benefits through similar mechanisms.
So you're saying the official exercise guidelines might be missing something important.
I'm saying the evidence is pointing that way. The current physical activity guidelines for adults do mention balance training as an important component for older adults specifically, but the research suggests that neuromotor training is probably valuable across the lifespan, and that waiting until you're already experiencing balance problems to start is missing a key window for prevention. Just like we don't wait until someone has heart disease to recommend cardiovascular exercise, we probably shouldn't wait until someone has had a fall to recommend balance training.
That's such a smart reframe. Start the balance work before you need it, not after. So let me bring this back to me and the listeners who are probably thinking the same thing. I'm in my 60s. I walk most days. I'm not falling yet, but I'd like to keep it that way. What's the specific actionable takeaway from everything we've talked about?
Here's what I want you and every listener to take away from this episode. Number one, Tai Chi is not just gentle movement, it is a structured, evidence based intervention for balance, cognitive function, and anxiety that the research shows can reduce falls by nearly 50%. Number two, you don't need to learn 100 movements or achieve perfect form to get the benefits. Start with a basic Yang style practice 2 to 3 times per week, 45 to 60 minutes per session, focusing on the rooted stance and mindful weight shifts. Number three, if you can find an in person instructor for your first few months, great. If not, a well structured online program is absolutely worth doing. Number four, consistency over time is what drives the largest effects. This is a practice, not a quick fix. And number five, talk to your doctor before starting if you have any existing balance or joint conditions, and listen to your body as you learn.
That's incredibly clear. Thank you, Claire. And I'll tell you what, I am going to find a beginner Yang style Tai Chi class or online program and try it for 8 weeks. That's my commitment, 2 to 3 times a week. I'm curious to see what changes I notice, and I suspect a lot of our listeners are thinking the same thing.
I love that, Robert. And for everyone listening, you don't need to overhaul your whole fitness routine. If you're already walking, already doing some strength work, this is an addition, not a replacement. Think of it as adding the balance pillar to a foundation you're already building. That's the longevity lab approach. Small evidence based additions that compound over time.
Before we wrap up, Claire, you mentioned something earlier about blue zone populations. Is there a connection between Tai Chi and longevity in the regions where people live the longest?
Great question. The blue zones, Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Ikaria in Greece, Nicoya in Costa Rica, and Loma Linda in California are regions where people routinely live to 100 with remarkably low rates of chronic disease. The common denominators in these populations include plant forward diets, strong social connections, daily natural movement, and a sense of purpose. Tai Chi isn't traditionally practiced in most of these regions, but it maps beautifully onto several of the Blue Zone principles. It's daily natural movement, low intensity, sustainable, integrated into life rather than cordoned off as a separate workout. It's often practiced socially in groups, which builds community. And for many practitioners, it becomes a meaningful practice, a form of moving meditation that connects to something deeper. What the Okinawans would call ikigai, or reason for being. So while Tai Chi isn't specifically a Blue Zone practice, it aligns with virtually everything we know about how centenarians move and live.
That's a beautiful connection. So adding Tai Chi isn't just adding exercise, it's potentially adding a longevity practice in the broadest sense.
That's it exactly. Movement, community, mindfulness, and consistency all in one practice, and all backed by rigorous research.
All right, Claire, let's land this. What's the one line rule for listeners to walk away with?
Today's rule: for better balance, a sharper mind, and a calmer nervous system as you age, practice slow, deliberate, mindful movement 2 to 3 times per week. The research supports it more strongly than most people ever realize.
Slow movement for long term strength. I like that. A nice counterbalance to all the high intensity messaging out there.
And with that, thank you for listening to Longevity Lab. If today's episode made you reconsider what counts as effective exercise, please subscribe and share it with someone who might benefit. We release new episodes every single day. I'm Claire.
And I'm Robert. Move well, live long. We'll see you tomorrow.
And of course, everything we share is for education and information. For any medical decisions, please consult your personal healthcare provider. See you next time.